Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hannah's Family Center breakout session. We'll be talking about our Safe Passage project this morning. My name is Laura Weston, and I'm the Development Director for Hannah's Family Center, and I'll start the presentation. I'll be followed by Elizabeth Dodson, our Operations Director, and closing will be Susan Griffin, our Executive Director. Before I get started, I wanted to mention something about our name. Some of you may know us as Hannah's House. We've been serving and supporting families in the San Diego community for more than 32 years. We recently changed our name to Hannah's Family Center to more accurately reflect what it is we do. We're a family center. We offer over 40 different comprehensive and integrated services to families, whether they live together or apart. We know that we can actually serve more families and be proactive in the community. We want to reach even the way our DNA is transcribed and read. And she goes on to talk about how people who are exposed to high levels of ACEs have higher heart disease and lung cancer risk, and they could have up to a 20-year difference to 2 happy, safe, and productive homes. And along the way, we're rebuilding familial bonds and ensuring that children have a happy and healthy relationship with each of their parents. Advance, please. So we base this work on some interesting Japanese concepts called wabi-sabi and kintsugi. And Elizabeth and Susan will go into more detail about this, but I'm going to give you a quick overview. Wabi-sabi basically means that the broken items of an object are just as sacred as the original object. And kintsugi is the way that sacred object is repaired and restored. Advance. So we think this is a beautiful metaphor for the healing of our families and thereby the communities they live in. The family is a sacred vessel or tapestry. It's had accidental tearing, breaking, but each part of the family has value and needs to be cherished. We know we're strong in our broken places and we can definitely work from there. Advance. So to take the metaphor a little further, you're probably familiar with the art of mosaic.
That focuses on finding beauty within the imperfections of life and accepting peacefully the natural cycle of growth and decay. There is a natural cycle of life for all of Earth's beings, Animal Bond program. Many children, especially those who witness or experience any kind of violence in the home, may feel anxiety and fears coming to our center for the first time. They may be resistant to see the visiting parent. Much like turtles hide in their shell, protecting themselves from the outside world, these children are guarded and do not want to come out of their protective shell. Animals are easy to trust. They have no ulterior motives. They simply offer unconditional love. Our reptiles offer children a unique position. They're very curious about these exotic animals, but parents are typically a bit apprehensive. These creatures become the bridge and catalyst for the parent and child to reestablish a bond, as the child excitedly gets to tell his or her parent about the new reptile friend they've met and encourage that parent to pet or even hold that animal. We practice compassionate service delivery throughout all of our programs. Another aspect of recognizing the beauty and imperfection is to acknowledge that all our families are unique. There is no set mosaic they have to build. We support and guide each member of the family to work together to create the new mosaic, which is unique for each family. Now, Laura touched on this briefly, and I expect that you are all familiar with ACEs, but I am going to just review these briefly as the ones that are most common for families that come to Hannah's Family Center. Recurrent physical abuse, recurrent emotional abuse, contact sexual abuse, alcohol and/or drug abuser in the household, an incarcerated household member, someone in the household who is chronically depressed, mentally ill, institutionalized or suicidal, a mother being treated violently, parents are separated or divorced, causing unexpected loss and change, emotional neglect, and/or physical neglect. We know that 63% of California adults have at least one adverse childhood experience. Left unaddressed in childhood, the long-term negative effects impact all roles in a person's life. The likelihood of intergenerational transmission is more difficult to prevent when adult ACEs are unmitigated. And as we know, the more ACEs a person experiences in life, the more likely they are to experience every level of this ACEs pyramid, leading up to early death. Often we find that many parents lack resilience in their own parenting role when their ACEs have remained unaddressed. A comprehensive intake and assessment of each family member, particularly related to ACEs, is critical to ensure that we develop an integrated plan for the whole family. So how do we help these families? We assess the type and quality of the co-parenting relationship throughout the relationship. We assess the state of the co-parenting relationship as we begin our work, assess the quality of the couple's relationship and each parent's role. We conceptualize family loss and separation as a normal family life cycle stage. We help parents understand and navigate the family and/or dependency court processes and understand the family dynamics of traumas, divorce, and separation. These are the 4 basic types of relationships, whether parents live together or separately: transitional, parallel, cooperative, and high conflict. Susan will go into more detail on each of these in her section. But before I move on to that, I would like to share a story of one of our families, the Smiths. This is an 11-member blended mine, yours, ours family that came to us at the beginning of 2016. On Christmas Eve of 2015, this family suffered a trauma that would have shattered even the strongest family. The parents separated, but they did stay connected through their relationship with Hannah's Family Center. Over the next 2 years, our multimodal programs held each member of this family in our safety net to give them the space to grieve, to learn, and to rebuild. I'm happy to say that this is a recent picture of the Smiths. The parents came back together. They worked with the entire family to build a new, stronger mosaic, and each member of this family is thriving today. And now I will turn it over to Susan Griffin to detail more about our kintsugi approach.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Laura, for setting the stage for this next part of the presentation. I would like to just comment that the family that Elizabeth just talked about is a really nice example of how our kintsugi works. It's 2020. I lost a century there. And so they came to us in the early part of 16. So we're very close to 5 years of engagement with this family, which is very common for our work at the center. Alex and Ingrid are their names, and they have shared their story with us going back to the very beginning. They've done this recently. And part of what they talked about is how important the long-term, unlimited engagement that we're able to offer. And this is one of the, I think, unique aspects of the kintsugi approach that we use for our families and our communities. So when we're talking about the art of kintsugi, it really is about attitude, beliefs, and an approach to the work. It requires a belief that when families and communities fall apart, break apart, that they really are seeking to become whole again. And yet the broken pieces make it nearly impossible for either one to conceptualize that wholeness is even possible. I think deep in one's heart, people long for repair. When a family is frayed at the edges or has actually broken apart. And replacement is one of the things, unfortunately, that does occur sometimes, sort of removing a parent and finding another parent and so on. However, I don't think that is really the true desire of most parents. I think that's an attempt in their own way to heal. So we work hard to convey our own sense of reverence and respect for everything that this family has built, their history, if you will. We believe in restoration. And we also believe that these mends in the family tapestry, these repairs in the broken vessel that represents the family, we really believe that as we repair, it becomes a testament to the living history of this particular family. And the beauty in this new reconstructed family, the beauty is in the meaning of what they have been able to deconstruct and reconstruct. And that is part of, I think, the magic of using the kintsugi concept for family and community repair. This slide is really self-explanatory, and yet it is really a very, very powerful slide, I think, and image. And the idea is that the flaws in the repaired vessel really make it unique, and it really speaks to that history. And we want our families, individuals, parents, children, we want them to consider this when they're feeling broken, because the truth is we all break, right? And we can all heal. And if we are able to join together with our families at Hannah's Family Center, we can help guide them towards a choice of restoration and really activating that desire of theirs to feel whole again in some way. And the reality is there are millions, probably more like billions in the world, who are stronger at the broken places. And there are so many cultures, ancient cultures, all the way to the more recent Western cultures that have examples of this. So I know this is a little bit of a busy slide, but what I'm going to do is sort of walk you through it. So Laura made reference in her presentation to a multimodal family intervention. And that is the model, the overall model that we use. And essentially what this means is that we have a number of services in various areas. So we have court ordered, we have support services, and all of these support services are free. We have co-parenting services, therapy services, psychoeducational structured classes. We have assessments that we offer, what are called bridge services. And this is really the bridge from agency to home and home to community. And then we have our human animal bond program, which Elizabeth, I think, very eloquently described the metaphors there. So what we do when a family comes in is we're really working with them, assessing them to be able to figure out what is it that this particular family needs from this blend of choices. And we individualize each set of services to the particular individual family member and to the system. I would like to point this out. So our intervention model is whole family, whether it's a one home family or a two home family. But I want to point out this asterisk about conjoint therapy. I would say that conjoint therapy is probably the most common therapeutic court order that we see out of family court. And it is the antithesis of family systems repair. It essentially breaks the family apart apart and says, this parent is a good parent, has a great relationship with the child. It's this parent over here that has a problem. So let's split the family apart and work with this parent and child. And of course, you know that that pretty much is going to always be a setup for failure. It needs to be family systems therapy. And so here's how we work. We will work individually and in sibling groups with the children. We will work individually with each one of the parents and or caregivers. So when I'm using this for generic purposes for the model today, however, we actually bring in any person in the life of the child that is significant to them, influential in the family, and so on. And we work very hard to include those folks in the assessment and in the treatment process. And then we will meet with the parents together, or as I say, additional caregivers and all kinds of, singles, dyads, triads, and so on. And again, our focus really is on doing an excellent assessment so we can learn as much as possible in our first phase of getting to know our families, so that we know how we're going to build the intervention that's going to be the most effective for each family. So I want to talk a little bit about something that I believe Elizabeth mentioned, which is family life cycle changes. And this pretty much applies to all of us, not just families that were sort of outside of us and coming to us for help. So for example, a one home family, something occurs, either, a particular event or something builds, and the family becomes vulnerable and they reach out for help. And so when that happens at the center, we provide the safety net all the way across this continuum. And we went for the vulnerable family, we assess, provide interventions, and most of them will return to success. However, some one home families reach out for help in crisis. And once they're in crisis, it means that the cracks in that vessel, the tears in that fabric can be pretty extreme. And it may not be possible that the interventions that we use are going to return them to success as a one home family. And so what sometimes happens is we move into guiding them, hopefully, towards a family breakup. And then are able to use interventions with them because we already have rapport, they trust us, we know their stories, so that they hopefully are going to end up cooperative co-parents. Let me pause for just a moment before I continue, because what I want to say is the 4 types of co-parenting relationships that have been mentioned are transitional, cooperative, parallel, and high conflict. I'm going to be speaking a little bit, I'm actually going to illustrate and explain those in just a moment here. So let's now go over to the 2-home family in a little bit different frame. So when people end up separating, there are 2 options for them. They can choose a more collaborative approach and mediate their differences as they move from 1-home family to 2-home family. And we offer many of these services. To be clear though, we do not provide any services related to the finances and property and so on. Our role is the co-parenting relationship and the transition of the children and skill development. And as Laura mentioned, the resilience building in all of the family members. And some of these folks are more likely than these over here to end up in a cooperative relationship. So let me talk for just a moment about the other option. And the other option is litigation and high conflict. So now you'll see it transitional, cooperative, parallel, high conflict. And high conflict is really about litigation. And it is extremely difficult to end up cooperative from litigation because just the declarations alone that must be filed to, if you will, prove that the other parent is a risk to the child or a poor parent are devastating for any parent to read, let alone in an open court of law. And these are open records too. It is so damaging to so many aspects of this parent in terms of their role as a parent. Our job is to diffuse conflict. The earlier people come to us, in the litigation process, the more likely it is that we have a shot, at least, of moving them to a cooperative relationship. However, if they've been at it too long, or if there are significant impairments in each parent that makes both of them high conflict, it's much more likely that we're going to try to work with the parents to move them to parallel. So here's the thing, that so many parents get painted with this brush that they are high conflict when it's only one person. It doesn't take two parents to make a high conflict co-parenting situation. It's extremely important to know because of the reasons that high conflict parenting exists. It's essentially a difficult person. So I'm going to go through the actual families now, illustrating these different types of relationships. And it's super important to remember this is whether parents live together or live apart. I think that if you sort of come into this with that mindset, you'll recognize that you probably know of parents, or maybe even had an experience where these kinds of issues were present in a one home family. And so this is why it's so important that this co-parenting concept be broadened more generally for helpers, that co-parenting is going on from the moment parents decide they want a child. So let me go through this. The slides are all the same in terms of the four paradigms. So let me explain some of this on this one, and then we'll move through it. The families that we work with and that you work with, there's a couple relationship. Out of that couple relationship, at some point, there is a decision to become co-parents. But that isn't the decision the couple typically talks about. They say, are we ready to become parents? Well, that's great, because there are three roles that parents have in their family. They have their couple relationship, they have their co-parenting relationship, and they have their parenting relationship. And this relationship is each parent with each one of the children, basically. And as Laura said, very often, most often, this word, this concept, this whole set of skills and support for the children are not even talked about until the family breaks apart, and then they're talking about co-parenting. Each one of the slides will have this information on it, because this is typically what is at the foundation of this couple's relationship. And then we're showing here the co-parenting relationship, mom and dad, and the child. So in transitional co-parenting, there's sort of this short term for those families who will move to cooperative, for example. The short term, it's unpredictable, it's reactive, there's sometimes some respect, and you'll see this gradually decreasing in negative aspects between about 1 year and 3 years, depending on all of the complications in the family. But this will gradually diminish, the short-term part. Long-term, some families are going to remain in a transitional co-parenting situation where the short-term is the long-term reality. And here's why. Mental health, chronic mental health issues, substance abuse, adverse childhood experiences that are unaddressed and have chronically affected the person through their adult life, and personality disorders that for the most part cannot be changed unless the person recognizes that they need to change some things. And then of course, the parent-child relationship. So we have classes, courses, therapies for all of these relationships, again, whether families live together or apart. So let me focus on just this family for a moment. So this family came to us many years ago, about 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago. They came with a restraining order, history of domestic violence, mental illness, and substance abuse. So they've been engaged. You'll see that the mom and the children have been active in a multitude of our programs for 7 years, and they continue to receive support services from us. The father has been unable to parent successfully, very sporadic. has gone at times years without seeing the children. However, there is an order for safe supervised visitation at our center, and the boys are well familiar with the center and all of the staff and all of the animals and so on. And so we are a safe place so that when if and when dad pops back in and they return to this feeling of unpredictability, they know that they have solidity and reliability and routine at the center. This is a cooperative co-parenting relationship. What's important to know here are two things. Let me first talk about the paradigm. The basic idea with cooperative is that both parents overall put the children first. They are able to have or develop basic trust in one another and thereby give each other the benefit of the doubt. And they have respect for the other parent. What does that mean? It means that they know that children need both of their parents in their life to the extent possible and to do so safely. And that they support that for their children and for the other parent. So in this particular case, they did not enter our facility until there was a 5-year separation. And this was a case where it was a sudden departure. The mother fled from one state to another state in order to be safe. And so they came to us with a restraining order, the father, the restrained, the mother, the protected, and a history of domestic violence and substance abuse. And here's what occurred. This family, over the course of about 18 months to 2 years, again, the multimodal kintsugi intervention, they were able to, despite the restraining order, they were able over that 18 months to 2 years to very gradually, step by step, remember, there's no time limit, there's no schedule, we're not manualized, right? They were able to access many services at the center, and they were able then to eventually, within 2 years, reach equally shared parenting time, the child going back and forth between the two homes with no support or involvement from the center at all, because it had been done stepwise. So they were able to reach a collaborative, cooperative arrangement without ever going back to court. And it's a really nice example of the ability to move from, obviously, what you could imagine was a very stressful, difficult situation, a 5-year separation between dad and the boy. So this is a really nice example of the kintsugi. And then parallel co-parenting. When I think of parallel co-parenting, I think of adults I have known who lived in separate bedrooms and pretty much had separate sets of friends and separate lives, and they were living together. However, in two-home family, parallel co-parenting basically means the same thing, and this is how it looks. It is the child with mom fully focused on the child, dad fully focused on the child, and the child goes back and forth, and parallel is here between mom and dad. And what does this mean? There is a chronic sort of high conflict if they have contact, mistrust, dislike, a lack of respect. And this mistrust, dislike, and lack of respect, this tends to be for people who move to parallel and stay there for the life of the child. It is because these issues cannot be resolved. So I want to talk just a bit about what happened here. This family came in with a restraining order. The father was estranged from the infant. He was in the birth room by court order. And then the mother refused access to the baby. And so the father hadn't seen the child in about 7 to 9 months when they finally reached us. And this is a case where there was no couples relationship. So the only couple that happened is they met, had a few dates, and then unplanned pregnancy. They did try to live together briefly, but they are completely different in every single aspect of a human being: worldview, beliefs, attitudes, etc. But here's the result, and this was a long, long involvement. They too ended up with equal shared parenting. The child has week on, week off with mom and dad. They chose collaboration, not litigation, despite the fact, and what a nice example, people think, oh, everybody has to be willing and be able to be cooperative, collaborative. No, they don't. What they need to do, though, is they need to be able to put the child first. And that is what both of these parents did, much to their credit. And so this child, for many, many years, these are cases that have been stable in this situation for anywhere from 5 to 8 years, so that you have some sense. And of course, how do we know that? Families stay engaged with us to some extent or another, and sometimes it's annual holiday cards and updates and so on. And then here's high conflict. You know, it's a little bit like borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. People are very quick to say, oh, they're high conflict, they're high conflict, and notice it's they. And please remember, it only takes one. If there's a parent who has suffered wounds, humiliation, a sense of shame as a result of the marriage failing, the relationship failing and ending up in court and having to battle over the children, some parents, some people are unable to manage that without blaming and getting stuck in the blaming position, doing battle, conflict. So let's look at the characteristics of this approach, even by one parent. Disrespect, anger, hurt, revenge, an intent to punish or do harm, and the children are collateral damage. So in this particular case, then, let's look at what happened. These children were fought over in court for 8 years. So think about what that means for these children. We got involved in 2014, but they had been in a high conflict, high litigation. Some people don't realize sometimes the litigation in these kind of families is one person filing in child support court, filing in family court for custody visitation. And sometimes there are as many as one hearing or sometimes even 2 hearings a month. And this can go on for years. So it's really important to know that one person trying to use the family court as a way to essentially heal their wounds and reconstruct a new sense of well-being for themselves, they can do that. And they can do that, and it is really done without consideration of the children. But the reason is they can't think about the children, can they? They can't put the children first. And that is the truth for some people who are parents, that it's about their own identity and self-esteem and the way things look in the world. So in this particular case, as I said, they had been stuck in high conflict for about 5 years before they even found us. We provided services to all 3 of these family members. Father came in once, and he didn't like the fact that he would need to engage. So he essentially walked out and then worked on sabotaging the work that we were doing with the mother and the children. And this is one where we did the dyadic work with the children, triadic with the mother, a lot of individual work with each one of them. And the result, mom's increased well-being, a higher self-esteem, a better sense of identity, started her own business, and so on. And both of the children are showing really the signs of the adverse childhood experience, the chronic stress of being raised in a high conflict litigation. And what typically happens is children split. And at some point in their life, they either have significant mental health problems or they choose a parent or they reject both parents. And it's because the split starts so early between the parents because of the litigation. Okay, it's your turn. Let me just say a little bit about this graphic. Laura mentioned initially that we are a child-centered organization, and our wabi-sabi, kintsugi, our overall approach to family healing and repair is with the child at the center. One of the quotes that personally for me as the leader of this organization that has always resonated and been a guiding star for me, if you will, is a quote from Pearl S. Buck. And the quote is, if our American way of life fails a child, it fails us all. And I deeply, deeply believe that. Because here's how it works, you know, the child's at the center and the family's in the home. And again, it doesn't matter what the constellation is, where people live, how long it's been since they've seen each other. It is those parents, adoptive or biological, that are the primary influence, for better or worse, on this child. And one of the basic roles of parents is to help their child learn self-soothing and help their child learn self-control. And adverse childhood experiences really inhibit anybody's ability to learn these things. And so it's very much an intergenerational problem. You know, there's this idea of breaking the cycle, but in some ways, breaking the cycle, I think, isn't quite, for me at least, the right way to approach it. I think it's more holistic. I think it's this, where the child is primarily influenced by who's in the home, and they are all very influenced by this family, this larger support group of family and friends, and then interact with, and some of these folks on this community ring become vital parts of either the individual child's life, the parents' lives, and so on. But these circles that all encircle the child are all very powerful in terms of how children are raised. And this is why our commitment is so strong to strengthening the family, including as many of these people as possible, and really working to help our individual family members and the family system engage or return to the support in this category. And then, of course, there's the influence of the society and the dominant culture, and we certainly are seeing many of those aspects, particularly, I think, in the social justice movement right now. It is time for Q&A. I am going to stop sharing my screen, and let's see what questions you have. And please feel free to ask anything, and we'd really like to dialogue with you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Susan, Laura, and Elizabeth. That was great. And just a reminder to our participants, any questions that you have, please do type them into that Q&A box. We have about 15 minutes more allotted for our time, so we have plenty of time for questions. Just off the top for you guys, so we talk a lot about families that are involved in family court and court-ordered families. Does Hannah's Family Center serve other client populations? And if so, who and how do we reach them?
You know, I think I'll take that initially. The Smith family, Alex and Ingrid, they were never in family court. It's part of why we think their story is so important. They are an example of the other families that we serve. Families who have a sudden trauma, an unexpected loss or change that just immediately almost threatens everything in the family, because the whole family suddenly disconnects. They're in shock, they're sad, they're confused, they're angry. And that trauma can be any one of a number of things. So Alex and Ingrid never went to family court. And really, they came to us desperately wanting to stay together as a couple and to include their family. We ended up providing services to all 11 members of that family between approximately January, February 2016 until about the middle, I would say, of 2019 in terms of continual service. And over the last 18 months, it's been very periodic. And it really has just been them, again, telling us how things are going. But I think Ingrid and Alex are a wonderful example of the other type of family we serve. You know, I think some people, when they look at the ACEs list, they think really they only think of that parental separation and divorce, right? But that absolutely is not what's going on. In fact, in a lot of communities and generally in our county, the number of never married parents exceeds the number of married parents in many areas and in many communities. And so I think that those never marrieds sometimes get completely ignored unless they file in court for something with child visitation orders. And so we can serve any kind of family, and we do serve families who have had trauma, including parents who don't want to separate. They come to us and they know that's where they're headed. They don't want to separate. This would be an example of somebody coming to us vulnerable to separation, but they want to stay together. So in that, that sort of paradigm that I showed with one family, two family with breakup in the middle, the one home family we're equally able to serve those families as we are the two home families. And let me know if that answers your question or not.
Thank you, Susan. Kind of related to that, Mia has a question in the Q&A. Does a parent have to have a court order to participate in supervised visits?
Yeah, so I'll take that one too. Supervised visits under the law are supposed to be a court order. However, there certainly are cases where a parent will not allow visitation to occur, and there is no court order for supervised visitation, and the other parent is willing to participate. I will say those are very rare cases, because most often those are cases where litigation is already going on, but there certainly are cases where litigation hasn't started, fortunately, where people can come. To say they're volunteers, I think, is not exactly accurate, because it's pretty rare for a couple who are divided around how to parent children to volunteer for supervised visitation. It really is, at least in our experience, it's more one parent is just usually scared about the child spending time alone with the parent because of something that happened. And they certainly can come to us and get, actually, we prefer in those cases to do therapeutic visitation, because that's going to be far more useful to the family.
Awesome. And then we have a question from Lexi, who asks, what are some of the barriers you experience around stigma related to accessing services, and how do you mitigate those challenges?
Elizabeth or Laura, or do you want me to take it? I guess I'm taking that one too. Oh, so when I hear stigma, part of what I think is culture, right? We do our very best. I mean, these three faces you're looking at are clearly white women of a certain age, which is not representative of our staff. We have diversity among our staff. However, just that reaching out part, for many people, regardless of their sort of ethnicity, their cultural orientation, it's hard. And so the way we do it really is we encourage people to come to our free services. So free is very attractive to people, and free that they don't have to make like a big commitment to anything. So I would say that our free services, we have a free dad support group, a free mom support group, a monthly free co-parenting workshop. We have a kids only book club. It's gone virtual. We used to have a very big and active free children's support group, and it was an arts and animals curriculum with sort of value themes. And we have had a very hard time moving that online. But I think the free services are one of the ways that we do that. However, excellent question, because in reality, our center needs to have locations all throughout the county. And most professionals who deal with exactly what we do and get in depth and have clients at our organization, that's what they say. But here's the thing, family court is not able to fund anything for any families. They can be a conduit sometimes for a particular grant, but they don't like doing it because they have to use their resources. So I would say part of it is like the Southeast Collaborative that we're a part of, the Domestic Violence Council. I think those are some of the ways that we try to reach out. And of course, our relationship with Price Philanthropies, and we participate in the City Heights Law Day. It's a day of clinics at the library in City Heights, and then our engagement with the schools in City Heights. So I guess I'm saying there's really no simple answer. It's such a good question, and I find it complex. And we really are currently looking at this in terms of how to really have a face more in communities where they are, you know, it's sort of shameful to reach out, or they believe you have to be crazy.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan. I know Elizabeth had shared the success story of the Smiths, and I know, Susan, in your presentation, you also shared some of our family stories. And I was just curious, how common are outcomes like that? And, you know, if not very common, how do we measure success for our families at Hannah's Family Center?
Well, I would refer to the 4 stories I just told you, and the Smith family as well. But let's just look at the 4 stories for transitional. I guess what I would say, and this is what we hear from families, I wish we would have found you sooner, and here's why. That transitional family came right away, right? At the very beginning. And so that is a success story. And the reason it's a success story is the boys are 100% comfortable at our center. And the mother has got, all 3 of them have gotten free support services for almost 8 years. I think the parallel co-parenting, if we did not exist, they would have not even known about parallel co-parenting. They would not have been able to spend almost 3 years of very active engagement, each parent taking classes, working on agendas, meeting to talk about something, having a hard time, backing away, and so on. So I believe those are success stories. Now, in terms of preventing separation, that is something we are actively working on. And that is part of changing our name from Hannah's House to Hannah's Family Center, is that Hannah's House has become so identified with divorce and separation and so on, and it doesn't even speak to what we can do for those families. And so we really are, and have been for years, a family center offering multiple programs and services. And really, I mean, we feel a personal obligation as an organization to get our message out there more. And so we're working on that. And how do we measure success? I guess those examples I gave is how we measure success. Are we able to improve parental warmth in the home or in both homes? Are we able to reduce stress on the child? Are we able to teach the parents and the child the skills they need to improve their resilience, improve their protective factors, and so on? And so I think that's really the measure.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, it looks different for every family, obviously, but yeah, those are things that are actually tangible that we get to see. We have one more question from Jasmine, who is asking about how do we help parents who have lost custody due to homelessness or poverty?
Yeah, what a good question. Well, everything we do is on a sliding fee scale. Almost all of our foundation grants are designed to provide low or no income parents with services. And it's one of the reasons we have such a robust free services program. Now, in terms of homelessness, we are able to help with like transportation in the form of bus passes, for example. We actively help our clients. I guess I call it client advocacy. You know, we want to know if they're having food scarcity, if homeless problems, and so on, and we will work with them to get them connected with resources in the community. And in some cases where there's been so much trauma, they really are not even able to have the agency to move forward themselves, like fill out an application, we will actually one-on-one do that with them.
All right, and we have a couple minutes left. I guess lastly, one last question. You guys talked about the principles of wabi-sabi and kintsugi, and we're just curious, how did those principles come to be foundational for Hannah's House?
Well, I guess I would start with the co-founder. I'm a co-founder, and the other co-founder is Asian American. And I would say that in general, from the very beginning, we wanted to prevent families from breaking apart and had a more holistic approach and way of thinking about it. And I think just very gradually, as we built and researched and read and so on, we realized that the concepts of wabi-sabi and kintsugi, that was what we were doing. And that was what the core values that Laura went through. That was how we were approaching it, what Elizabeth talked about in terms of how we bring things together for the families. So it was more that, if you will, we realized at some point along the last 30 plus years that those really represented what we were talking about, what we were trying to do, what we were trying to build with our families. And so that's sort of how we came to that.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, it looks like we are about out of time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for attending today. And please do reach out. info@hannahs-house.org, HANNAHS. We still are using our old name there. As you might imagine, it's a pretty cumbersome lift to move everything over to a new domain. So it's hannahs-house.org, and it's just info@. So please feel free to reach out to learn more about services, to get questions answered and so on. And either Laura, Elizabeth, or I will answer your questions. So please reach out to us.